I think that worked. Okay. So what I thought is that I would just kind of do an overview and then share some thoughts about how to organize, and then move into some discussion later. My view of leadership at its best is facilitative rather than pretending that I'm an expert on high. And I also am curious to hear what questions or hopes, that's part of my interest coming into this meeting, is hearing what do you all need to do what you want to do out there, because that helps me, be a resource and a support to you. Let me pause here and to say we're recording, and if you're comfortable with that, it looks like your name, Julio. Will you introduce yourself and say something that you showed up, or a reason that made you want to show up today? Okay, so I'm taking from that this is somebody who's here but not interested in being recorded, and we now have somebody else showing up too, where the name has changed. So it looks like somebody's there but not wanting to share their name or to be recorded. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to just jump right in with an overview first of the UU Christian Fellowship. The UUCF has been around since 1945, existing for a while as both a steward of the liberal Christian tradition within Unitarian Universalism, and also a publisher and facilitator of scholarly, thoughtful conversation. In the late 1990s, and this was also, the UUCF was also primarily located in the neighborhood of Boston, as they say. In the late 1990s, there were a couple of revivals and gatherings and ways of people finding each other that was very meaningful. I still hear about it, in the last year as I've talked to people about what do they love about the UUCF. That experience of coming together, worshiping together, devotional life together has been very meaningful, often for people in congregations that they love, and where there's not as much of the language or the practice that they also love. So in the 2000s, Ron Robinson in 2003 became UUCF director. He lives in Oklahoma and is a missionally oriented pastor. That helped the UUCF become more of a national organization, not only anymore only in Boston. And also Ron's work gave it a missional accent with a focus on relationships with those on the margins, and also brought it online with Facebook groups and a website, that kind of thing. I began when Ron stepped down about a year ago, and the board told me about 3 goals that they had. One goal was to shore up the organization, just strengthen with membership and that kind of stuff. Second goal was to strengthen online presence and develop that, and we've updated the website this year. We've experimented with online worship, getting daily memes out on the scripture quotes out on the Facebook page. And the third was to plant UU Christian congregations, which is an interesting challenge. And I've talked with some folks about that. Unitarian Universalism generally is trying to figure that out about how to get new things started. And it occurred to me after having some conversations in the first half of the year, where it seemed like such a large undertaking, that maybe something to really try to support in the fall was not swinging for the fences, not talking about planting new churches, though, Annette, maybe you're, maybe, who knows what you're doing over there. It could be, yeah. But really to talk about groups and chapters. So that's some of just giving some context about being here today. So first, to define UUCF chapter, I got some questions about this from folks leading up to today's session. And I've heard stories from folks about a whole range of different things that this could mean. For instance, in San Diego, where I just was for the revival a couple of weeks ago, and also in Metro New York area, these are cluster-wide UU Christian groups. So they can be cluster-wide. They can also be small groups or study groups within a congregation. They can be local small groups, or they can be online groups. Increasingly, starting a group, you just start up a Facebook group and see who shows up, helps to have some sustainability and some thought about it. I'd recommend, but it doesn't necessarily in 2016 mean all local. People ask, does this need to be called a Christian group? No. In San Diego, where I just was, I forget what they call it, but something like the Jesus Study Group. People there were a lot more comfortable talking about studying Jesus than they were in claiming the identity of Christian. So that's something to think about. And there's no, whatever lowers barriers while still clarifying the group. And does it need to be a particular form? No, but I think that it's helpful to clarify, and we'll get into this in a second, the why. Is this a devotional group that invites people to prayer and communion? Is this a study group that is deconstructing and sort of looking at the historical Jesus? Is this a service group that wants to add the sort of the vertical dimension of prayer into the horizontal dimension of service? So the only common trait I'd say in all of this openness is that what you imagine lives somewhere in that Venn diagram of Christianity and Unitarian Universalism, somewhere in that space, and desire some kind of connection or affiliation with the UUCF or some support from it. Okay, so with that out of the way, sort of the open-ended, but I was hearing some questions about, well, does it need to be this? Does it need to be that? Usually the answer is no on that. So the first question that's helpful, I think, is to ask why. Why would you want to organize such a group? To clarify the purpose. Because this could save you a lot of time. There was a member of the church that I serve who loved the Christmas carols sung to Christ the Lord. And she did not love the Christmas carols that the church had used since its humanist founding. Mostly what she wanted was a time around Christmas to sing those carols and to celebrate Christmas more broadly, in the way that spoke to her heart. This is not somebody who would need to organize a whole group. It's somebody who needs to talk with a minister or talk with some friends at church and, get a night together. And same too with, if what's really wanted is a brief class, on a book or a book study, that also can be helpful. So one way to look at why is to imagine possible outcomes, is to say, if everything worked as I hoped it did, if all barriers were removed, 5 years from now, what would have flourished and flowered from these efforts here? And that might give you a sense of what your heart desires, of what your, the need that you're speaking to. And it's helpful also to imagine in that the concentric circles of what's happening within individuals, what's happening in relationships, and what's happening in the congregation and out in the world. It may be that you have no interest in, serving the wider world, or nothing would be different. But to ask yourself that clarifies the function. Okay, and I'll trust that one of you might just wave your hand or something. You've got something to add or something to ask. So I'll just keep rambling. Oh yeah.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. There's this woman here, Ms. Eckhart. I think we should welcome. She's been here.
Thank you. Yeah, I had technical difficulties. I couldn't get on. I missed the first 20 minutes or 15.
Hello, Heike.
Hello. Sorry about that. I tried on the computer. That didn't work. And then I needed to install the app and all that.
I'm glad to see you. Heike and I are in the same group.
So Heike, you're also from, I wanted to let you know we're recording, and so I hope you're comfortable with that. And do you want to say where you're from and sort of some of what made you want to show up for this today?
Yeah, so I'm, as Marianne said, we're both members of the Unitarian Church of Evanston, and I think you and I probably talked at GA this year.
Okay, yeah.
In Cleveland. I think I might have been at the booth. Mm-hmm. And so I actually kept hearing that somebody would start a Christian UU group at my church, and then nothing happened. And I talked to my pastor about it, and he said, well, why don't you start one? And so here I am.
Okay. Yeah. I've gotten in trouble like that too. Wouldn't it be nice if... Okay, well...
yeah.
So just to summarize the opening is that a UUCF chapter really, it has broad definition. It doesn't even need to have the name Christian in it. It is then secondly helpful to think about why. What is the purpose? What's the function? You know, what's your really clarifying your dream here. So then moving into what? Thinking about, is this a one-time conversation? Is this a short-term class? And I bring all these up not to discourage anyone, but in fact to encourage folks that, you know, if what you're really wanting is just to, you know, short-term thing or a try-it-out thing, that could be good. And it could be, you know, just phase one. Is it important, as you think about what the form, is it important to be in your congregation, or could it be part of a cluster? Now, there's pros and cons. Any cluster-wide activity may slow down conversation or communication, decision-making. You know, you'll have more cooks in the kitchen. At the same time, I think that people move to cluster-wide organizations because of critical mass. And so, you know, thinking about the trade-offs there, and one could develop into the other. Think about, as you think about what, is this a study group? Think about the culture, I guess. Is this a study group where skepticism and deconstruction is important, where somebody who's really read a lot of John Shelby Spong and wants to point out the inconsistencies in Scripture is welcome and celebrated? Or is this a place where confession might be welcome and where prayer might be welcome? It could be that you want something of both, and that's fine. And if you really want one more than the other, that's helpful to get clear on early. It is difficult for a group that seeks vulnerability and intimacy, as in prayer and confession, to go very deep if somebody's really shown up to be a gadfly and to, you know, make speeches about the different texts. Likewise, for people who are really interested in a rich conversation, scholarly conversation, to have everyone going on about in prayer and speaking in the language of the tradition is, you know, might be frustrating. So thinking about what? As you define, notice, are you doing this all by yourself? Is this an internal conversation? And if so, notice that just in terms of sustainability, before you move out too far, make too many commitments, you know, it's helpful to notice if anyone else is along for the ride. And if they're not, to try to make this, you know, ask someone out for coffee, find a couple of other folks. This is where talking to the minister can be helpful to share, you know, I really love for this thing to happen and I'm not sure how to do it. Do you know anyone else? Ministers love to do matchmaking for the most part. for these kinds of interests. Notice other similar groups. It could be maybe there's a great pagan group or a humanist group in your congregation. Notice their culture, their form, because no matter the different content or label they've got, they're part of the same culture of your congregation. And so they likely what works for them in terms of processes is going to teach you about what might work for you as you go about doing what you want to do. Also, as well as culture, be aware of the formal processes in your congregation. In our congregation in Oak Ridge, we've got shared ministry agreements where 5 people come together and say, this is how we're pursuing the goals, this is of the church, these are the resources we need. It's a pretty formal process to form a group. In other congregations, it may be that you've got key gatekeepers who need to sign off, the minister, the administrator, or who knows who, or that person who sits in the corner and scowls at everyone. So who knows who, how things happen, but learn that about your congregation. Also notice, is there something already going on that you could build on? Are there seasonal partnerships with Christian congregations where you might hop into representing your congregation as part of it, and build on that? Are there already a couple of people who have expressed interest and you might join in with them? I really recommend talking with a minister sooner than later, especially because as you begin to go public in a UU congregation with this, one of the services you'll provide is inviting whoever hasn't gotten through all of their reactivity about Christianity, you'll invite them to be able to share some of that reactivity. And so better for you to have talked with the minister beforehand, kind of let them know what you're up to, what you're curious about, and that way they're not surprised by dealing with some reactivity, et cetera, et cetera. They can also be gatekeepers, as I said, and so figuring out the minister's role in this is helpful. After this kind of clarifying the what, I think it's helpful to design a short-term commitment. Not everybody show up to this first thing that's going to be, the first weekly meeting for the rest of your life and you're locked in and always have to go. But maybe the first thing is a small worship service that you put together around a holiday, a Maundy Thursday service, an Advent service, something, and anything that you do around worship. Again, make sure to check in with a minister, just that's part of their priestly role as a minister. So, doesn't mean they need to do it or even be there, but it's helpful to talk. Could be that you offer a showing of, there's a great series called Living the Questions, LTQ, Living the Questions. You can borrow these from congregations that already have them. You can purchase them. They've got a range of, there's a series on Paul. There's one called Painting the Stars, about science and religion. And you may know the right introduction. You may want to have a discussion around a chapter or two of a Marcus Borg book called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. This is a short, accessible book. I really love Marcus Borg because he comes from the Jesus seminars, but he both translates it into the language of a practitioner, not only a scholar, and he also writes in a very accessible way. So I think that's a good short resource. And again, you may not want to gather people for a discussion of the whole book, but but just kind of a chapter or two. Annette, did you have something to throw in there? Okay.
Yeah. I'm taking notes, and I got Meeting Jesus by Marcus Borg. I have no idea how to spell it. B-O-A-R-D, B-O-R-E-D.
B-O-R-G.
Thank you. See?
Yep.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
M-A-R-C-U-S, and is the title Meeting Jesus? Is that the title of this book?
Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time.
Okay. The whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And he also has some
Could you
other
repeat
books. Oh, yes?
Could you repeat the first suggestion you had? I have Marcus Borg, but you said something before. It was cutting out, so I didn't capture the title for that.
Yeah, Living the Questions. It's a series of
Living the Questions.
Yep. And maybe for a short time commitment you want it. So with these are like 2 or 3 times, or maybe even just one. It's just kind of a class, a taste, low pressure. People can show up, try it, but it's nothing big. A really easy thing is to say, put out on church Facebook page or send around, we're going to the local Methodist church this Sunday, or the early communion service at the Episcopal church that's at 8, and our UU service that's at 11. So we're going to go to that communion service and then go get bagels afterwards and talk about it. Anyone want to come? So these kind of low commitment, first try things, it's sort of like going fishing, seeing who shows up. For whatever you do, make sure to take names and email addresses. So you know how to get in touch with folks. To make sure that people show up, get clear on the difference between inform and invite, 2 words that start with I but are very different. Through newsletter, website, communication channels, you will inform people of whatever you're doing, and that's sort of, think of it in terms of broadcasting. Informing, while it makes people aware, it does not such a great job at making people show up. What really helps make people show up is inviting, and that's a direct, hey, the minister said you were interested in this. This is what we're doing. I hope you'll show up at this time. So inform and invite. Just be clear that you're knowing about the difference. Let's see. And all this while, even as you're showing the movie or having people go out to church with you or Christian church with you or having a book discussion, it's helpful to voice your opinion or voice your desire that you want to gather something, and maybe hold that loosely. Like, don't pass out your 5-page 5-year plan quite yet, because you want partners and you want a space to talk with them about what they want too. If you imagine that you'd like to do something cluster-wide, after you've met with your minister, it's helpful to ask them to introduce you to other ministers. Even if you've met other ministers at cluster events or church parties or whatever, if you can ask your minister to connect you for this context, then that's very helpful. Because ministers get so much email that if somebody they don't know very well sends a question, they may not get to it. If they hear from a colleague with UCC, then you can follow up saying, yes, can you tell me your administrator's contact info or somebody there who'd be interested in? So you make contact with the minister at the other church, and then as quickly as possible, try to get them out of the way so that they don't become a bottleneck. But that you've kind of connected with them, got their blessing, but then find out who do you need to talk to spread the word over there. So do the event, hold classes. Next, after you've sort of given people a taste of the content, whether a class or a movie or something, invite people to a formation meeting. And again, you at this point are clear on what you're going for: service group, study group, devotional group, and it's helpful to be clear about why. We really want to help people go deep in prayer, or we really want to move out and build relationships with homeless folks, and do this in the context of scripture or whatever. But maybe hold back on the how, because so you got the why clear, but maybe not the how. Also, I've got some heresy to share here that will sound very non-UU. A friend of mine, a colleague who's also a friend, she says, invite the skeptics to a second meeting. And what she means by that is, after you've shown a movie or been to a class, you might want to, instead of saying, hey, everybody, ding, 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 we're going to have this huge thing, find the people that you would love to be your partners from the group, and they'll make themselves known. The people who ask to help out, the people who seem open and, that kind of thing. If there's somebody who's been at these initial, who has been challenging, combative, difficult, something like that, that doesn't mean that they're shunned forever, but it does mean that they might be better invited to a second or third meeting and not to this first formational meeting. So you've shown the movie, you've had a book group, you've had a holiday-based service or something to kind of gather the folks, and now in this second formational phase, you're inviting the likely partners. And think about how you want to do this. I mean, and look for health and look for diversity too. Diversity in all ways, because as you gather that first meeting of 5 to 7 folks, you're also setting the culture. So if everyone is, a Gen X male identified white man like me, then that may determine the culture of the group down the road. So think in terms of, well, how can we have generational difference, racial difference? You might even want to difference of talents and abilities. Somebody really likes to keep things organized. Somebody likes to facilitate discussions. Do you want to pray at the meeting? Could the prayer be read? Could it be spoken? Do you want to go there, or is that too much too fast? And then after the first meeting, where you gauge people's interests and hear that, make sure that people go away with responsibilities. See if everybody can have at least one thing that they've committed to do alongside coming to another meeting. So in this, you're kind of building shared responsibility. And I have a friend who, when he was a child, was responsible for pouring lemonade on Sundays at church. And he said he never missed church because if he didn't go, then nobody would pour the lemonade. And I think that also helps distribute responsibility so that it's not a one-person show. It is helpful. There's a book by Clay Shirky called Here Comes Everybody that's kind of about 21st century culture. And he has this interesting thing that's relevant to group formation. But he talks about it in terms of writing. He says in the 20th century, people filtered, then published. So they would write something and send it to an editor in New York, or they'd send it to a panel of scholars. They would first, it would have to be filtered, and then those people would give their blessing and it would be published. Now in the age of the blog, in the age of Experifail, it's publish, then filter. So you put something up, try something out, and then adapt as you go. So I would recommend that while it's good to have a formational meeting about, what do people want to do, as soon as possible, weave in the actual activity. If your desire is a service project, have that second meeting, at a food distribution center, where you can also have a picnic afterwards and talk, but where you really are jumping in, where people are not learning that this is a group that has meetings, because that too, you're setting a culture as you go. So better to do and adapt and jump in and mess up to the extent you feel comfortable. Some people like to have a solid plan before doing, but I'm just saying there's the opportunity to jump in and get people engaged. As you form and as you begin moving down this pike, really get clear on some key questions. How will you make decisions? And by the way, it's my intent to, within 36 hours, to get all these notes posted on the UU Christian Facebook website, as well as a couple of small group sessions just to prime the pump. So if I'm talking too fast, no need to scribble down everything. But as you're talking with your group, how will you make decisions? What's your understanding of leadership? There have actually been some pretty successful UUCF chapters that have orbited around a dedicated leader. So it's, in San Diego, what I learned when I went there was that there had been a man who was devoted to showing up every Sunday for 20 years. Even if no one else was there, he'd be in that room ready to talk about Jesus with people. And now this group has come out of it. So, it's okay. It's okay if you've got somebody who is a Bible scholar, et cetera, et cetera. If you've got somebody who's especially gifted, but think about that and also ask questions of sustainability. And if there is a strong single leader, it's especially important to talk with the minister and figure that out, because when power becomes consolidated in one person, especially around spiritual issues or spiritual undertaking, things can get funky. And so better to wonder about that from the get-go than consolidate too much power in somebody. Talk about how you will communicate. How do people join and how do they leave the group? Some groups, if they are becoming very intimate and vulnerable with each other, by about the fourth or fifth session, they are not open groups. And again, that's heretical to the kind of openness that we preach and proclaim. But if this is a group that has committed to going deep with each other, to be thoughtful about how do you join, what are the processes, so just so that it's not kind of a folks wandering into something that's already developed. And it could be that it's always an open group, or it could be that some activities are open, et cetera, just to be clear about that from the start. How will you be accountable to the congregation? What's the relationship and in a larger church, it may not be the minister. It may be the DRE, or it may be somebody else who's staff contact, et cetera. How will you monitor or review whether you're doing, 6 months down the road, whether you're doing what you thought you set out to do? This doesn't need to be a formal monitoring process, but it can mean that you put on the calendar 2 months from now, let's check in about is what we wanted to have happening. What about a covenant? At what point in your process does the group commit to norms about relationship? And then also, as you think about what you're doing, what resources do you need? Think about what connection to the UUCF you'd like. Is this something that works very closely with the UUCF? Is this something where you just want us to know you're out there, but you're good to go? And what partnerships are possible? Something I'm curious about, again, with my thought of wanting to be a facilitative leader, is whether it might be helpful to have a Facebook group for leaders of groups and chapters like this who could share lessons learned and resources. Let's see. There are, depending on the nature of the group, there are resources out there. John Shelby Spong books are helpful for more the folks who more want to do the deconstruction. And then there are books that are more kind of devotional ones. Shane Claiborne has a book of ordinary prayer, which is, so Shane Claiborne is a progressive evangelical. He's got in his liturgical year filled with prayers, etc., is a lot of Martin Luther King stuff alongside scripture. It's very UU friendly. There is an app called Text Week, which has a lot of great resources that follow the lectionary. And so you look up Text Week or download the Text Week app, and it's not all liberal stuff, but it's a great range of stuff, different translations of the texts, different commentaries, sermons, sometimes small group stuff. So that's kind of a treasure trove that's already there. So, and I think that next to the Shane Claiborne stuff, that's another good resource to have. And then there are a couple of kind of out-of-date UU Bible study sessions, if that's the kind of thing you're looking for. And then there's, based on the Parker Palmer Circles of Trust thing, we've got a couple of small group sessions in development that, as I say, along with notes from this of the sort of nuts and bolts stuff that we'll try to get up by Thursday on the uuchristian.org website. So let me stop there. Oh, well, let me stop first by asking a question. One, wondering, is a Facebook group for small group leaders helpful, or would a monthly check-in be helpful to support group leaders? What are ways that leaders can be supported? And then, so what are ways that leaders can be supported? And then secondly, what are ways that ideas that you haven't heard, or ways that groups can be supported that you know of, or that you'd like to ask of me and UUCF? I'm going to put myself on mute.
Well, Heike, you've had more conversations with Brett. Brett is our senior minister.
Right.
We had some conversations about, I don't know if worship services is quite the right term, but apparently Vespers had happened at UCE in the not too distant past. Because I'm sort of intrigued about the idea of not just gathering in a discussion group on a regular basis. I really like the idea of visiting local Christian congregations. Evanston is a progressive community, generally speaking, so I think that could be, there's some potential for interesting partnerships there. Advent is coming up. I probably have more questions than, ideas at this point, but I do, and I just appreciate, and Heike and I have talked about how we're going to get together and talk after this, but even the idea of like a service element, thinking broader than, I have really enjoyed our discussion groups. They've been very rich, but you're sort of prompting me to think, and maybe that's a way to reach other people as well. If there's people who are not really looking for because we do love our meetings, don't we? And
it seems like it, yes.
Right. And if people are just like, I can't do another meeting, but some sort of service opportunity on I don't know, whatever basis, or a service that might be a different way to connect with people.
Definitely. So I have had a brief conversation with Brett about this. My idea was, first of all, going into this, my idea was that this would actually have, the group would actually have some sort of Christian spiritual practice to it. That is a tad difficult because the person that Brett connected me to is not necessarily interested in that. He's more interested in the discussion part of it. However, I don't think this, like in my opinion, we can totally have both. We can have the discussion group, and then we can also have something in addition to that would be more of a spiritual practice. And I've talked to Brett about that, and he's very open and supportive of that idea. So he even said, I have some materials. It sounded to me like he might actually be interested in leading a service at some point. So it's this is all reasonably new. So I'm hoping sometime before the holidays to get together with him, and then that maybe in the new year, when things are not quite as crazy, that we can start up start up the Vespa services again, or maybe do something after the service on Sunday. I think that I agree with you. There are probably some people who don't want to do just another meeting, as much as I love the book discussion, but who are really only looking for some sort of spiritual, Christian-inspired spiritual practice in a UU context. And I'm trying to see if we can get that off the ground too.
And I also think, we all have limited time and resources, and we're a small group at this point. And I think the idea of possibly looking outside of UCE to see, what, maybe we're attending Advent services at another congregation. Do you know what I mean? I'm a little reluctant to try and take on more than we're really going to be able to do. But it's all really interesting stuff to talk about and think about.
Indeed. So yeah, I don't see that we can get that off the ground for this holiday season, and I would definitely be interested in just, especially for the holidays, get a group together and just go somewhere else and have an Advent service there. So, but it would be more fun to actually, I think it would be great if we had other UUs with us, not just, I feel a little, I have to say, honestly, I feel a little out of place in a traditional Christian church these days. But if I go with a buddy or two, that'll be different.
Well, yeah, right. It's sort of like a field trip is the way but a way of extending our resources when we're pretty limited.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I think thinking about a space for reflection or debriefing, which not only serves the purpose of clarifying the mission. So say you go to the Presbyterian church and there's a lovely Advent service there, but you hear some stance about Jesus that isn't quite you. It's helpful to talk about that with your UU buddies after, and it also helps build some relationship in a way that sitting next to each other in the pew might not.
Right.
I'm seeing there's a comment from Angela that says, I like the idea of Facebook group for leaders to share resources. So that might be something, this is the kind of publish then filter thing. Maybe what I'll do is invite folks who signed up, because there were quite a number of people who signed up and then didn't come today, and just see if the Facebook group works, then after a month or so, we'll know that people are using it. And if it doesn't, easy enough to let it go.
Oh yeah.
Sounds
always
good to me.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts, or requests, honestly, because this is the UUCF chapters. I get the sense we're pretty active about 20 years ago, and now I'm kind of fishing around for what does it look like in 2016, what do people want, etc.
Can't hear.
Okay, well, and maybe it'll come up in the Facebook leaders group as you try whatever you're going to try. Okay, so by Thursday, I'll clean up my notes here, and then we'll bang out the rest of those small group sessions, so we can have those available as resources on the UU Christian website. And we'll share the recording of this meeting as well. And if it is helpful to come back and have another sort of mutual encouragement session or on anything from particular content where we could practice doing a small group session together, to process to I've got this member who's causing all kinds of trouble, or to marketing. We've got this great thing. How do we reach people? How do we get people to show up? I want the UUCF to be helpful in that regard. So I guess we'll leave it there.
Oh, I see a hand.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Or a comment or something. You had two questions that you were asking us, ways that leaders can be supported and ways that the groups can be supported. I found this actually very helpful, and we're so new, and it sounds like some of the other people on here are new in what they're trying to attempt to, that we don't kind of know what we need. But I like the fact that you offered that the UUCF could support us. It might be helpful to quarterly just have plan to quarterly have another little meeting like this and just see where we are. What have we done? People could then make commitments that help us do whatever it is that we say that we're going to do, to the group. And it could also be called for from that Facebook group, which I think is a good idea. I mean, I don't even know at this moment if I'm going to do a UUCF covenant type group on the island, because we don't even have a congregation here. We might be a satellite of my old, it's like, who knows? And it looks like everybody else is kind of in the forming state too, but I appreciate your offer for help. I'd also love to know what kind of help you feel you could offer. So, it's like catch-22. Okay, that's like that.
Okay.
I like that. I was going to say that what would be helpful is if we could do this not in the middle of the afternoon. Usually I'm at work. So just find a time that works for everyone.
Good thought.
Because I wonder if some people ended up having work-related conflicts or something like that. It happens.
Yep. Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, so what I'll do, I'll ask my assistant to send out, let's see. I think first, I think we're starting that Facebook group for leaders just to be able to talk with each other. And there, among a larger pool of folks, we might find, when do people want to get together to talk for mutual encouragement and accountability, et cetera. Sounds like that's of interest. And also, I'm figuring out the UUCF's role beyond just facilitation, whether it is curation and recommending resources, because there's plenty out there, whether it's creating resources. So anyway, I'm experimenting, and I'm helped by your saying, here's what we need, or here's how we could help. If one of you is really going blazes or going great, then you may want to come on and tell other people how it's done. So anyway, it's nice to connect with you all, and I am so grateful that you're willing to imagine getting something going in this spirit. I think there's a great thirst for it in our congregations and in our movement, not to the exclusion of other kinds of UUism, but just a place to kind of center down and say those ancient words and pray in those ancient ways. So thank you for the ways that you're serving your folks around you and your communities. And we'll follow up and get that Facebook group going and resources by Thursday on our website. I said it out loud, so it has to happen.
The best way to do it. And thank you for setting this up.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Next time that we do have a prayer.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I think the leaders are open to prayer. So
sounds great.
When you plan your agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll open with prayer. Good thought.
Okay, or close with prayer, or light chalices, or whatever we want to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
Take care.
Aloha.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.